before the flood, so close to creation, where mankind doesn't have the relationship with God, where he has called Abraham and brought his people out of Egypt. So Noah is struggling to understand and to follow God's will without the context that we all bring to the idea of God.
So this is why, or you would say this would be the justification for the reason that God, the word God, is never used in the context of this. They only call him the creator, which some people say they don't even use the word God in that movie.
Almost. Actually, there is one place where the word God is spoken. Ham says to Tubal-Cain, "My father says there can be no king. The creator is God." So the word is actually there. But yes, using a different name for God helps us to put ourselves in a different cultural context. It helps us to see Noah and his family living in a world apart from ourselves.
Critics of the film say it takes too many liberties, it's too far astray from the biblical account, and therefore it's not worthy of their attention.
The divergences from the story are certainly going to be controversial. I think we need to distinguish two different things. First, what does Aronofsky add to the story? And second, what, if anything, does he take away from the essential elements of the story? He certainly adds a whole lot of drama, this whole dark family drama. That's what's going to be most controversial, along with the environmental themes of the film. But to me, I think the more important point is that he retains almost all of the essential points of the biblical story. We have the 6 days of creation, Adam and Eve in the garden, the fall, the tempter, the forbidden fruit, Cain killing Abel, the sinfulness of mankind. That is very important. The environmental themes have not crowded out violence and depravity and inhumanity and defiance of God and so forth.
But in Noah's explanation, you come away. In fact, he says it at one point that the only creatures that didn't defy God's will in the garden were the animals.
The animals live as they did in the garden, which is what Thomas Aquinas would say as well.
So therefore, they're the only ones who should be saved. I mean, that's what he thinks in the movie.
He doesn't. It's a little more ambiguous than that. He kind of goes. His understanding of God's will is developing throughout the course of the film, but he definitely connects the film to judgment for sin. He says, for the 10 generations since Adam, sin has walked within us, brother against brother, nation against nation, man against creation. We murdered each other. We broke the world.
Why Aronofsky, though, for a film like this? Why would a studio entrust $200 million to this particular director, taking nothing away from his gifts, but it's a little bit like getting Quentin Tarantino to direct Emily Bronte's story?
This has been a passion project for Aronofsky. This is a story he's thought about for over 15 years. He's felt a deep connection to the Noah story since he was in 7th grade and wrote a poem about it that won a prize. So I think that maybe he just wore somebody down.
Let's talk about that subplot. You mentioned it a moment ago. There is a subplot that really is the engine that drives this story dramatically through the arc of this, no pun intended, through the dramatic arc here. I don't want to give it away, but it is a troubling, to say it's dark is kind of undercutting it. And because Noah is the agent of this subplot.
He almost becomes the antagonist.
Yes, he does.
Yes. And yet he's a righteous man. He's trying to do God's will. He's determined to do God's will no matter what that is. And while the theme of what he believes he's called to do is not in the Noah story, it's not dissimilar to what other people elsewhere in Scripture are called by God to do. So
no, there's an overlay of other biblical stories here, but the way that the biblical story begins and ends justifies it. Here, I found it a little confusing, and I know from the emails people are enormously troubled, those who have seen it.
As well they should be. This is a film that is challenging, it is disturbing, it will push back on your expectations, and it is not for everyone.
Yeah. Let's talk a moment about, if I have a chief complaint about this movie, I will just say, and I've said this to those who were the creators, the creative team, the watchers, these stone-like giant creatures / fallen angels that populate the beginning of this movie and actually are there building the ark with Noah. Why? Why did you need them, and why are they there?
A lot of people have been fascinated by the figures in Genesis and also in later rabbinic literature, the sons of God and the Nephilim.
Right.
And people wonder, what are they? In some versions, the Nephilim are giants who are actually demi-angels, fathered by angels with human women. And Aronofsky gives this a spin that almost has a feel as if it came from something in Tolkien or Middle-earth.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the credit for Tolkien.
Yes.
Or
personally, I thought thought it was an interesting take. The way that he presents the angels, at least he gives them a dignity that we haven't seen in a lot of movie portrayals of angels. I like to think of these angels as a kind of fictional class of semi-fallen angels. They're clearly not like demonic opponents of God, and they're not connected to the serpent in the garden. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's it's. I just think it's easier for a diaconate candidate to unravel that than it is for an average moviegoer. And this is where I think, I wasn't as deeply offended by this film as I think some average theater goers are.
Sure.
Because they're looking at it as a ride. They just came to see Gladiator in the flood.
Right.
That's all they wanted.
And that's not what when I saw this film, almost the first words out of my mouth were, does this movie even have an audience? It's too religious for the secular viewers. It's too secular for the religious viewers.
Right.
It does have an audience. I am that audience, or I'm in that audience, but I don't know how many other people are. I certainly can't say everyone should go out and see it, but I'm also not going to deny that I was very moved by it.
Yeah. Steven Greydanus, thanks for being here.